I'm Megan, I'm 28 years old, and I've always believed that every scratch tells a story, especially the ones on my old bicycle. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Portland, where the lawns are trimmed perfectly and everyone seems to drive a shiny new SUV. My teal bicycle doesn't quite fit in. The paint is chipped, the seat has a tear covered with duct tape, and the chain squeaks no matter how much oil I use. But I love it. It's the last thing I have that belonged to my dad before he passed away 6 years ago. Every time I pedal down the street, I feel like he's still beside me, cheering me on the way he used to when I was little. Most mornings, I ride that old cruiser to the bakery where I work downtown. The ride takes about 20 minutes, but it's the best part of my day. The wind on my face, the early morning smell of coffee drifting through the air, it's simple, peaceful, grounding. But peace doesn't last long in my neighborhood. My neighbors, Tara and Josh, seem to have made it their personal hobby to mock me for owning that bike. Tara, in her spotless workout gear, will stand in her driveway pretending to stretch just to catch me leaving for work. "Morning, Megan," she'll call out in that sweetly poisonous tone. "Still holding on to that antique? You know, they sell actual cars now, right?" Josh usually laughs along, leaning on his shiny black Range Rover like it's a status symbol. Even their kids get in on it once they followed me halfway down the block, chanting, "Pedal faster, Megan," until I turned the corner. At first, I tried ignoring them, pretending their laughter didn't sting. But some days, it gets to me. There's something about being laughed at for something meaningful to you that cuts deep. That bike isn't just transportation. It's memories of my dad teaching me to ride without training wheels, of our weekend trips to the farmer's market, of him promising that no matter what happens, I should always keep moving forward. Still, I never show them how much it hurts. When Tara mocks me, I just smile and wave. I tell myself they don't understand the value of sentimental things. They only care about what looks good in photos, or what matches their carefully curated image of success. But I do care about meaning. I care about stories, and this bike is full of them. Every morning, I park it behind the bakery, locking it up near the back door. The bakery is my safe place. I manage the morning shift, baking pastries and greeting regulars with a smile. It's honest work, and even though it doesn't pay much, I love it. The customers know me as the cheerful girl who rides the old blue bike. Some even joke about it kindly, calling it Megan's Magic Chariot. Unlike my neighbors, they say it with warmth, not mockery. One particular morning, the air was crisp and golden with autumn sunlight. I arrived at the bakery early, as usual, parked my bike, and went inside to prep the ovens. Around 8 a.m., I noticed someone standing outside the shop window, looking at my bike. At first, I thought it was just another curious passerby. People sometimes admired its vintage look. But this man didn't just glance. He was studying it intensely, walking around it, leaning in close as if inspecting something rare. I stepped outside, wiping my flour-covered hands on my apron. "Can I help you?" I asked. The man turned, smiling warmly. He looked to be in his 50s, wearing a neat tweed jacket and round glasses. "I certainly hope so," he said. "This bicycle, where did you get it?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. "It was my dad's. He gave it to me years ago." His eyes widened slightly. "Do you happen to know what model it is?" I shook my head. "Not really. I just know it's old. Probably older than me." He chuckled softly, brushing a hand along the frame like it was made of gold. "This might be more special than you realize," he murmured. "I've been collecting vintage bicycles for over 20 years, and this looks like a Handley custom. Possibly a 1952 model." I frowned, confused. "Is that supposed to mean something?" He looked at me like I'd just told him I didn't know who Picasso was. "If I'm right, it means you're riding one of the rarest production bicycles ever made. There were only a handful of these built before the company went bankrupt in the late 50s. I laughed nervously, thinking he must be mistaken. My dad was a mechanic, not a collector. He found most of his stuff secondhand. "You must be joking," I said, smiling politely. But he wasn't. He pulled out his phone and asked if he could take a few photos for comparison. I hesitated but nodded. As he snapped pictures, Tara walked past with her ever-present smirk. "Careful, Megan," she said mockingly. "Don't let the paparazzi scratch your relic." The man ignored her completely, which somehow made Tara's smile falter. He thanked me for my time and gave me his card. "My name's Henry," he said. "I specialize in restoring and authenticating rare bicycles. I'd love to take a closer look sometime, if you're willing." I pocketed his card, amused but skeptical. "Sure," I said lightly. "Why not?" As he walked away, Tara called after me. "Don't get your hopes up. Junk is still junk." I smiled, forcing myself to stay calm. But something about Henry's reaction stuck with me. That night, long after the bakery had closed and the town had gone quiet, I found myself sitting in my small living room, staring at my dad's bike under the dim light. For the first time, I didn't just see rust and wear. I saw history. And everything began to change the day a stranger stopped me outside the bakery, staring at my bike with unmistakable awe. The man's eyes lit up the moment he saw my bike, like he'd found buried treasure. The next morning, I was still thinking about Henry. I kept replaying his words in my head. One of the rarest production bicycles ever made. It sounded too unbelievable to be true, but curiosity had already taken root. I even brought his business card to work, flipping it over between my fingers every chance I got. Around mid-morning, as I was setting out trays of cinnamon rolls in the display case, I saw Henry's familiar silhouette outside the bakery window. He stepped in, holding a folder and wearing the same polite, excited smile. "Good morning, Megan," he greeted me cheerfully. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by again. I couldn't stop thinking about your bicycle." I laughed nervously. "I guess it's not every day you find a beat-up teal cruiser that steals your heart." He chuckled, then opened his folder, revealing photos of old bicycle catalogs, newspaper clippings, and restoration notes. "I don't think you realize what you have," he said gently. "If it's what I think it is, your father owned a 1956 Handley Custom Cruiser, a pre-production model. These were handmade, Megan. Only about 50 ever left the workshop." I blinked, completely stunned. 50? That's impossible. My dad wasn't rich. He bought most things at yard sales or swap meets, Henry smiled knowingly. "Sometimes treasure hides in the most unexpected places." He gestured toward the bike parked outside. "Would you mind if I take a closer look again? Just a few more photos, maybe note down the serial number if I can find it?" I hesitated for a second, but nodded. His sincerity was disarming. We walked outside together, and Henry knelt beside the frame, carefully wiping away a speck of dust to reveal faint engravings near the pedal joint. He scribbled something down in a notebook, then stood up, looking genuinely thrilled. "Megan," he said softly, "I'm not making any promises yet, but I think this might be the real deal. If you're open to it, I'd like to have a few of my colleagues authenticated officially." I was speechless. "Officially? Like, in an auction or something?" "Exactly," he replied. "If this bike is what I think it is, collectors would pay serious money for it. I'm talking tens of thousands." I almost laughed out loud. "Tens of thousands? For that thing?" I pointed at the bike, half joking, half incredulous. He smiled again. "There's history in those bolts." Before I could reply, the doorbell of the bakery jingled. Tara strutted in, sunglasses perched on her head, clutching her phone like it was a trophy. She ordered a latte, pretending not to notice Henry and me outside, but her eyes flicked toward us more than once. I could practically feel her curiosity brewing. When Henry left a few minutes later, he shook my hand warmly. "I'll be in touch soon. Keep it safe, all right?" "Of course," I said, tucking his card back into my apron pocket. As soon as he was gone, Tara sidled up to the counter, her lips curved in that familiar fake smile. "Who was that?" she asked casually, though her tone was anything but. "Just someone interested in my bike," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Her eyebrows arched. "Your bike? Oh, come on. What could anyone possibly want with that rusty thing?" I shrugged. "Apparently it might be worth something." She froze mid-sip, eyes widening slightly. "Worth something?" Like how much? I laughed. I don't know, Tara. It's probably nothing. She leaned forward on the counter, lowering her voice. You're kidding, right? That thing looks like it barely survived the dinosaurs. Her words stung, but I smiled anyway. Well, maybe it's a fossil someone wants. She gave a forced laugh and walked away, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She hated not knowing more than I did. After my shift ended, I couldn't resist looking up what Henry had said. I sat on my couch that night, laptop open, typing 1956 Handley Custom Cruiser into the search bar. I didn't expect much, but when the images loaded, I froze. The bikes in the photos looked eerily similar to mine, same teal color, same frame curve, even the same distinctive handlebar design. I clicked on one listing from an auction site. It read, 1956 Handley Custom Cruiser, sold for $24,000. My breath caught. $24,000. I scrolled through more listings, but there were barely any. Each one mentioned words like rare, handmade, collectible. The further I read, the more I realized how little I knew about what my father had left behind. When I went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my dad working late in the garage, the sound of metal clinking and old radio tunes humming in the background. He'd always said the bike was special. But I thought he meant sentimental, not valuable. What if he knew? What if he'd left it for me on purpose? Knowing one day it would mean something more. I pulled out an old photo album, flipping through until I found a faded picture of my dad standing beside the same teal bike, his hand on the handlebars and his wide grin under the summer sun. On the back of the photo, written in his messy handwriting, were the words, "Never sell your freedom, Meg." I smiled softly, whispering, "I'm not sure what you meant, Dad. But I'm listening." Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Henry. "Found something interesting about your serial number. Call me when you can." My stomach tightened. That night, I began searching online, and what I found left me breathless. The photos online looked almost identical to my bike, down to the paint shade and frame curve. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. The teal color, the narrow chrome handlebars, the subtle ridges in the frame, it was all there. Each photo I found online looked like a mirror of my dad's old bike, except theirs were spotless, perfectly restored, and displayed in collectors' galleries. Mine sat in my small garage, covered in a thin layer of dust and a lifetime of memories. I stared at the auction listing again, my heart racing. 1956 Handley Custom Cruiser Limited Edition, one of 50 produced. The bidding history ended at $24,000, but a note at the bottom said one model had been valued at $35,000 due to its authentic serial engraving. My hands started trembling. Was it possible that my father's bike, the same one everyone mocked, was one of those originals? I tried to convince myself it couldn't be. My dad wasn't the type to care about luxury or collectibles. He fixed cars, built shelves out of scrap wood, and found joy in things others threw away. But then again, he was also meticulous. If he'd kept that bike in such good condition all these years, maybe he knew exactly what he had. I grabbed a flashlight and hurried to the garage. The air smelled faintly of oil and old metal. My bike leaned against the wall, paint dull under the overhead bulb. I crouched beside it and began searching for numbers, anything that could confirm what Henry had mentioned. Near the handlebars, under a faint layer of grime, I saw something. I wiped it with a cloth and leaned closer. There, engraved so delicately I'd never noticed it before, were the characters H and H0037. My breath caught. The exact same format appeared in one of the listings I'd just read, H and H for Handley and Havers, the company's founders. I sat back on my heels, stunned. I wasn't just imagining things. This really was one of them. I spent the next hour rummaging through my dad's old boxes in the attic. Most were filled with wrenches, car manuals, and faded photographs. But at the very bottom of one, tucked inside a yellowing envelope, I found something that made my throat tighten, a folded receipt. The ink was faded, but I could still make out the name, Handley & Sons Custom Works, Portland Branch, 1957. Beneath that was a handwritten note in pencil. model number 0037 special order. My eyes filled with tears. My dad hadn't just bought that bike, he'd ordered it directly. He must have saved up for years, or maybe even worked with them somehow. I tried to imagine him as a younger man, proudly picking it up from the shop, unaware that decades later, it would become a priceless relic. When I returned to the garage, I stared at the bike again, my heart swelling with both pride and sorrow. Every scuff, every dent told a story not of neglect, but of love. My father had cared for it like a piece of himself. For the first time, I began to understand what Henry had seen. I wiped the frame clean, watching the teal paint shimmer faintly under the light. The front badge still read Handley and Havers in small cursive letters, the edges worn from years of handling. Beneath it, a faint pattern of engraving caught my eye. I tilted the bike toward the light and saw something new, tiny etched initials, R.H. Just beside the badge. R.H. Richard Harper. My father's initials. He'd marked it himself. Not for anyone else to see, just a quiet reminder of ownership. It felt like he'd signed a secret note to me across time. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos. Then I texted Henry. You were right. It's marked H and H0037. I found the original receipt too. He replied almost instantly. That's incredible, Megan. Keep everything safe. I'll make some calls and get back to you tomorrow. This could be significant. I set the phone down and sat in silence for a while, just looking at the bike. I traced my fingers over the handlebars, feeling the cool metal beneath my skin. For years, I'd thought of it as an old piece of my past, a sentimental relic of childhood rides and family memories. Now, it was something else entirely. It wasn't just valuable. It was part of history. But with that realization came a strange sense of unease. I knew people, especially in this town. Gossip traveled fast, and value drew attention like a magnet. If anyone found out what this bike was really worth, it could change how they looked at me forever. Still, I couldn't resist sharing the discovery with someone. I called my best friend Marissa, who lived a few towns over. You are not going to believe this, I told her breathlessly. After explaining everything, she laughed in disbelief. You're telling me that rusty teal thing in your garage could pay off your student loans? Not just that, I said. Apparently it might be worth even more. Meg, that's insane, she said, half joking. You've been riding around on a down payment for a house. I laughed with her, but deep down, my stomach fluttered with both excitement and fear. I knew my quiet life was about to change. I spent the rest of the night polishing the metal, gently buffing away years of neglect. When I finished, the teal shimmered faintly, almost like the day it was built. I imagined my father smiling at the sight, proud that I'd finally recognized its worth. As I stood back and admired it, I whispered softly, You really did leave me something special, didn't you, Dad? I didn't know it yet, but that little engraving would turn my simple life into a storm of attention and greed. The next morning, I was greeted with something strange silence. Usually, by the time I wheeled my bike out of the garage, Tara was already outside, pretending to water her plants just so she could make one of her usual comments. But that morning, she and Josh stood by their car, whispering to each other. Their kids, who normally giggled and pointed at me as I rode by, just stared quietly. Something in the air felt different, charged, curious, almost cautious. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they were finally bored of their little jokes. But when I arrived at the bakery, I started to notice something odd. Two women I'd never seen before were standing outside the window, phones out, snapping pictures of my bike. Is that the Handley everyone's talking about? One of them asked. I froze. I'm sorry, what did you just say? The Handley Custom Cruiser, she repeated, gesturing toward my bike. My husband saw something about it on Facebook. A collector said a woman in Portland had one of the originals. My stomach dropped. Henry. He must have mentioned it to someone, and word had spread. In a small town like ours, gossip traveled faster than wildfire. For the rest of the morning, people kept stopping by, peering through the window like my bike was a celebrity. Even my boss, Dan, came out from the back, wiping flour off his apron. "So," he said with a teasing grin, "you going to be rich soon, Megan?" I rolled my eyes, trying to play it off. "It's just an old bike, Dan." He chuckled. "Old, sure. But if it brings customers in, I might just put it in the front window." The famous Handley Cruiser property of Megan Harper. Local baker extraordinaire. I laughed weakly, but my pulse raced. I didn't like the attention. My bike wasn't supposed to be a spectacle, it was personal. Private. Mine. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside to find Tara standing by my bike, her phone in hand. "Hey!" I said sharply. "Can I help you with something?" She jumped, turning to face me with an innocent smile. "Oh, Megan, I was just admiring your, vintage piece." "Taking pictures of it, you mean?" She chuckled, unbothered. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. It's just that everyone's been talking about it. I heard it might be worth a small fortune." My stomach twisted. "Where did you hear that?" "Oh, you know how it is," she said casually. "A little birdie in the neighborhood group chat mentioned that some collector was offering money. I didn't believe it at first, but..." Her eyes trailed over the bike. "I guess you never really know what junk people find valuable." I tightened my grip on the handlebars. "It's not junk." Her fake smile faltered for half a second. "Of course not, sweetheart. I just hope you know what you're doing. People get greedy when there's money involved." The way she said it, slow, deliberate, felt like a warning and a threat all at once. That evening, when I locked up the bakery, Henry called. His voice was cheerful but serious. "Megan, I have some good news. I spoke with a private buyer who's very interested in your Handley. He's a curator for a vintage bicycle museum. He's willing to offer $38,000 if the bike checks out at the auction house." I nearly dropped my phone. "Wait, 38,000? "Yes. He wants to verify the authenticity in person first, but if the serial matches the registry, it's a done deal. I can set up the meeting next week." I sat down on the curb outside the bakery, heart pounding. $38,000. That was more money than I'd ever had in my life. "I don't know," I said finally. "It feels wrong to sell it. It was my dad's." "I understand," Henry said gently. "But even if you don't sell it, you should at least know what it's worth. It's part of history, Megan. People should see it." I promised to think about it. When I got home, I parked the bike in the garage and sat on the step, staring at it. The idea of parting with it made my chest ache, but the thought of that much money was impossible to ignore. It could change everything, pay off my debt, fix the bakery's old equipment, maybe even buy a car. As I sat there, the garage light flickered. Through the small window, I caught a glimpse of someone moving outside. A shadow lingered near my fence, then disappeared when I stood up. I told myself it was just my imagination, but I double-checked the lock on the garage door anyway. Later that night, I could hear faint voices outside my house. Tara's voice carried through the still air. She says some collector's offering $30,000. Can you believe that? Josh laughed. For that old thing? Maybe we should find out what makes it so special. Their laughter echoed faintly, and I felt a cold unease settle in my stomach. I pulled the curtains shut and sat on my bed, hugging my knees. I didn't want to believe my neighbors would actually try anything, but the greed in their voices was unmistakable. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't stop thinking about Henry's offer, my father's note, and the strange way everyone suddenly looked at me not as Megan, but as the woman with the golden bicycle. Then, that evening, Henry called again with an offer that made me drop my phone. Henry said he had a buyer willing to pay $38,000 for my bicycle. When I heard that number again, even over the phone, it didn't sound real. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the counter, staring blankly at the kitchen wall. $38,000. For my dad's old bike? I swallowed hard, trying to form words. "You're serious?" "Completely," Henry replied. "The buyer's name is Mr. Langford. He runs a small private museum dedicated to mid-century cycling. He's been searching for a Handley custom for over a decade. Yours could complete his collection." I couldn't help but laugh a little, half disbelief, half nerves. "Henry, That bike has a broken reflector and a dent in the back fender. It's not some showroom piece. He chuckled softly. That's the beauty of it. Authenticity matters more than perfection. Original parts, original paint, even original wear. It all adds to the value. I sank into a chair, pressing my palm to my forehead. My mind was spinning with possibilities. $38,000 could wipe out my student loans, fix the bakery's broken oven, and maybe even allow me to move out of my cramped apartment. It was life-changing money. But as quickly as the excitement came, guilt followed. My dad had loved that bike. Selling it felt like selling a piece of him. I could almost hear his voice teasing me. Don't let go of the things that keep you grounded, Meg. Henry must have sensed my hesitation. Look, he said gently. I'm not saying you have to sell. I just think it's worth knowing what your options are. If you'd like, we can meet at the auction house next week for an appraisal. No pressure. I nodded slowly, though he couldn't see me. All right. Let's see what they say. After we hung up, I sat there in silence for a long time, staring at the bike parked by the door. The idea of losing it hurt, but so did the thought of letting an opportunity like this slip away. When I finally went outside to clear my head, Tara was, of course, waiting. She was standing near her mailbox, pretending to check her phone, but her eyes flicked to me instantly. Hey, Megan, she called out, all smiles. Heard from your little collector friend again? I froze, trying to keep my tone calm. Yeah, he called earlier. Her eyes glinted. And, what's he offering? I heard rumors about some huge amount. I hesitated, realizing the truth was already spreading faster than I could contain it. He said someone might be interested in buying it, but nothing's final. Tara tilted her head, feigning concern. You should be careful. You never know when people might try to take advantage of you. I'll be fine, I said quietly. Oh, I'm sure, she said with a syrupy tone. Just don't come crying when you realize you got scammed for a piece of junk. I walked away without replying, but her words followed me like a shadow. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed every few minutes with messages from neighbors and even distant acquaintances. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted to catch up. It was strange how quickly people's attitudes shifted. Yesterday, I was the girl with the rusty bike. Today, I was the talk of the town. The next day at work, it was even worse. A few regular customers congratulated me like I'd already won the lottery. One of them even said, "So Megan, when are you trading that bike in for a car?" I smiled politely, but inside, I was starting to feel trapped. The bike that once made me invisible now made me a target of endless curiosity. During my lunch break, Henry called again. The museum confirmed they'll do the evaluation this Saturday. Bring your documentation and the bike. They'll handle transportation if needed. I exhaled slowly. All right, Henry, let's do it. After hanging up, I looked at the bakery's clock. It was only noon. But my stomach felt heavy. I knew Tara and Josh would see me leaving that weekend, and I dreaded the questions that would follow. When I got home that evening, I carefully cleaned the bike again, just like I used to with my dad. I oiled the chain, polished the frame, and even buffed the chrome edges with a soft cloth. By the time I was done, it gleamed under the garage light, proud and timeless. I smiled, whispering, "You'd like this, Dad. You really would." Just as I was about to close the garage door, I caught a flicker of movement across the street. Josh stood there, half hidden behind his car, pretending to check the tire pressure. But his gaze lingered on me far too long. I gave a polite wave, but he didn't wave back. He just turned and walked inside. That uneasy feeling returned, stronger this time. I double-checked the locks before going to bed. Still, I couldn't shake the image of his watchful eyes. The next morning, things escalated even more. When I arrived at the bakery, Dan pulled me aside. "Megan, I don't know what's going on, but I just got a call from a reporter asking about you and your bike. Do you want me to give a statement?" "A reporter?" I repeated, startled. "Yeah, some local magazine wants to feature the woman with the legendary bicycle." He chuckled nervously. "It's wild." I shook my head. Please tell them no. I don't want any attention. Got it, he said, but the smile on his face told me he was already imagining how much free publicity the bakery might get. By the end of the day, I was exhausted physically and emotionally. I'd gone from being invisible to a novelty overnight. And as much as the money tempted me, I started to wonder if the cost of that fame was too high. That night, Henry texted me again. Everything's confirmed for Saturday morning. Auction house at 10 a.m., I'll meet you there. I stared at the message, heart pounding, then looked over at my bike resting in the corner. It was strange how something so familiar could suddenly feel so fragile. I brushed my hand over the seat, the worn leather warm under my palm. Just one more ride together, I whispered. After that, we'll see. By the next morning, half the town was convinced I'd become rich overnight. Suddenly, everyone who mocked me wanted to be my friend. The shift was almost eerie. A week ago, I was the girl with the junkyard bike. Now, every time I pedaled down the street, people waved like I was some kind of celebrity. The same neighbors who used to look through me were suddenly eager to talk, asking about the big sale, offering congratulations, pretending they'd always believed in me. Tara, of course, was the worst. She showed up at the bakery 2 mornings in a row, all smiles and false warmth. "Megan, sweetie," she cooed, leaning over the counter. "I feel terrible about what I said before. You must think I'm such a witch." I forced a polite smile. "Water under the bridge." She grinned wider, sensing an opening. "You know, Josh and I were talking. We should throw a little neighborhood event. You could bring your bike, show everyone what all the fuss is about. Maybe even get some media coverage. Wouldn't that be fun?" I stared at her, trying to decide if she was joking. "Tara, it's not a carnival attraction. It's just my dad's bike." She waved dismissively. "Oh, don't be so modest. People love stories like this. You could really make a name for yourself." "I'm not looking for fame," I said quietly. Her smile faltered for a split second before snapping back into place. "Of course not. But it couldn't hurt to network a little, right?" Before I could answer, Josh walked in carrying a coffee cup, pretending he'd just happened to be nearby. "Megan," he said, with exaggerated enthusiasm. "I heard about the offer. Impressive. Must feel nice having something everyone suddenly wants. Honestly, it's a bit overwhelming," I admitted. "Well, if you ever need help managing that kind of money," he said, chuckling, "I could give you some investment advice. I know people in finance." I smiled thinly. "I'll keep that in mind." When they finally left, my coworker Jenna leaned over. "You realize they're just sniffing around because they think you're about to get rich, right?" I sighed. "Yeah, I know." As the days passed, it got worse. People followed me on my morning rides, taking pictures like I was part of a parade. A teenager even tried to film a TikTok of me while shouting, "That's the $40,000 bike." I wanted to shout back that it wasn't about the money, but what good would it do? By midweek, even the local paper had caught wind of the story. They called the bakery asking for an interview about the young woman preserving a piece of history. Dan, my boss, was ecstatic. "Think about all the customers this could bring in," he said, practically glowing. I just wanted my normal life back. Henry called that evening, sensing the stress in my voice. "I told you this might happen," he said sympathetically. "Public curiosity grows fast once word spreads. The best thing you can do now is finalize the Cayman sale quietly. Once it's done, the attention will fade." "I hope you're right," I murmured. He was silent for a moment, then added gently, "Keep that bike locked up tight until Saturday. Don't let anyone near it, all right?" I promised him I would. But promises don't always stop what's coming. That night, I was jolted awake by a loud metallic sound from outside. My heart leapt into my throat. I glanced at the clock 3:04 a.m. The noise came again, sharper this time, like metal scraping against metal. I grabbed my phone, crept toward the window, and peeked out. The garage door was slightly open, something it never was. My pulse quickened. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out onto the porch, the night air biting against my skin. The faint sound of bicycle wheels squeaking echoed down the street. Someone was taking my bike. "Hey," I shouted, sprinting toward the garage. The figure ahead of me froze, then bolted. The beam of my flashlight caught the back of a dark hoodie as the thief disappeared down the alley. My breath came in sharp bursts, adrenaline flooding my veins. I fumbled for my phone and called 911. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived. Henry, who lived only a few blocks away, came over as soon as I told him what happened. We searched the area together until one of the officers found the bike lying in a patch of weeds behind a fence. It was scratched, the paint chipped even more, but it was still mine. As I stood there trembling, Tara appeared at the end of her driveway, wrapped in a robe, pretending to be concerned. "Megan, what happened?" she asked, eyes wide with faux innocence. "Someone tried to steal my bike," I said, my voice shaking. "Oh my gosh," she gasped. "That's terrible. Who would do something like that?" Her tone was sympathetic, but her eyes darted toward the bike, studying the damage a little too closely. "Probably someone who heard about its value," I said flatly. She frowned. "Well, maybe you should have been more careful. Word's gotten around, you know." Henry stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "She's doing her best, ma'am. Maybe people should respect her privacy instead of spreading gossip." Tara's smile tightened. "Of course. Just trying to help." She turned and walked away, but not before giving Henry a look that said she didn't appreciate being called out. Once the police left, Henry helped me move the bike inside the house. "Keep it in your living room if you have to," he advised. "Someone's been watching." I nodded, still shaken. "I don't understand why anyone would go that far." "Money makes people desperate," he said simply. "Especially when envy's involved." That night, I sat on the couch staring at the scratched teal paint, feeling both relieved and violated. The thought of someone sneaking into my garage, touching something so personal it made my skin crawl. The scratches hurt me more than they should have. They weren't just damage, they were proof that greed had entered my world. But as the auction day approached, someone tried to steal my bike from my garage. I found my garage door open at 3 a.m., and my heart nearly stopped. The air outside was cold and heavy, the kind that makes silence feel louder than sound. My pulse hammered in my ears as I crept toward the garage, barefoot and clutching my phone like a weapon. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness and my worst fear became real. The bike was gone. I froze, a rush of panic rising in my chest. That old teal frame, my father's legacy, my lifeline, it wasn't there. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then adrenaline kicked in. I bolted down the driveway, scanning the shadows, hoping it was all a mistake. That's when I saw them. Faint tire tracks in the dew-covered pavement leading toward the end of the street. My hands shook as I dialed Henry. He answered groggily. "Megan, it's 3 in the man. Morning, what's wrong?" "It's gone," I gasped. "The bike, it's been stolen." He didn't even hesitate. "Stay put. I'm coming." Within minutes, Henry pulled up in his old truck, his headlights sweeping across my lawn. Together, we followed the tire marks down the street, flashlights darting across fences and curbs. A few houses down, near the empty lot by the park, something glimmered faintly under a streetlight. "There," Henry whispered. We ran closer, and there it was. My bike lay on its side, half hidden in the grass, the handlebars twisted, the chain knocked loose. It looked bruised but not broken. Relief flooded through me so quickly that my knees nearly gave out. "Thank God," I breathed. Henry crouched down to inspect it. "Looks like they didn't get far," he said, his voice tight. Maybe they realized it was too risky to carry something so recognizable. The police arrived a few minutes later, lights flashing blue and red across the quiet street. One officer took my statement while another photographed the scene. I felt dazed, still half in disbelief that someone had actually broken into my home over a bicycle. Henry stood beside me the whole time, arms crossed, his expression grim. When the officers finished, they promised to review nearby security cameras and patrol the area for suspicious activity. As they drove off, I turned to Henry. "I can't believe this. Who would even—" He gave me a knowing look. "You and I both know who's been a little too interested lately." My stomach tightened. "Tara and Josh?" He didn't answer, but the silence was enough. When we rolled the bike back into the garage, I noticed the scratches on the frame. Deep, jagged marks along the teal paint. I felt a lump rise in my throat. "It's ruined," I whispered. Henry shook his head. "No, it's not. It's just a little scarred. Like all good stories." I tried to smile, but tears stung my eyes. "He'd hate to see it like this," I said softly. "My dad, I mean." Henry's voice softened. "Your father built things to last. So did this bike. So will you." He helped me carry it inside the house this time, insisting it wasn't safe in the garage anymore. We propped it beside the window in my living room, where I could keep an eye on it. The metallic smell of the chain filled the air, oddly comforting despite the chaos. Before Henry left, he said, "I'll call the auction house in the morning and let them know what happened. Don't worry, the scratches won't affect the authenticity. If anything, they add character." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I believed that. When the door closed behind him, I sank onto the couch and stared at the bike in the faint moonlight. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house made me jump. I checked the locks 3 times, set an old baseball bat beside my bed, and left the hallway light on like a nervous child. By morning, exhaustion hit me like a wave. But something inside had changed. Fear had turned to defiance. If someone thought they could scare me into hiding or giving up, they were wrong. My dad didn't raise me to back down. When I went outside to check my mailbox later that morning, Tara was there, pretending to prune her roses. She glanced up, feigning surprise. "Rough night?" I stared at her. "You could say that." She smirked slightly. "Word around the block is someone tried to take your bike. Must be awful having something so valuable that everyone wants it." "Funny," I said, keeping my tone even. "Not everyone wants it for the right reasons." Her eyes flickered. She just gave a tight smile and turned back to her roses. That was all the confirmation I needed. I spent the rest of the day installing new locks on the doors and setting up a security camera above the garage. Henry stopped by that afternoon with a small gift, a bottle of touch-up paint in the exact teal shade of the bike. "It's not about hiding the scratches," he said. "It's about taking ownership of them." Together, we patched the scuffed spots, restoring what we could. It didn't look perfect, but it looked loved. As I brushed my hand over the repaired frame, I felt something settle inside me. This bike had survived 60 years of weather, time, and now theft. Maybe it was tougher than I'd given it credit for. Maybe I was, too. That night, I sat by the window, watching the security footage on my phone. Nothing but quiet streets and flickering lamplight. Still, I kept the baseball bat nearby, just in case. The scratches on my father's bike weren't just marks anymore, they were proof of endurance. Proof that something precious could survive even when people tried to take it away. I didn't know it yet, but the theft attempt had revealed who my true enemies were. The footage from my new security cameras told me everything. 2 days after the break-in, I sat in my living room, heart pounding as I replayed the security video for the 3rd time. The image was grainy but clear enough. Someone had walked up my driveway just after 2:45 a.m., glancing around nervously before forcing the garage door open with what looked like a crowbar. The motion light had flickered on for a split second, catching his face just long enough for me to recognize him. Josh, Tara's husband. My stomach twisted. I leaned back in disbelief, my heart racing. There was no mistaking him. The same build, the same baseball cap he wore every morning while washing his car. I froze the frame and stared at it for a long moment, my anger building with every breath. When I'd moved into this neighborhood, I'd thought the worst thing about Tara and Josh was their snobbery. Now, I realized they were capable of something far uglier. I picked up my phone and called the police. The same officer who'd come the night of the theft answered. When I told him about the footage, his tone turned serious. "We'll send someone to pick it up for evidence," he said. "Do you want to press charges?" The question hit me hard. I wasn't someone who liked conflict, but this wasn't gossip or mockery anymore, this was a crime. "Yes," I said firmly. "I do." Later that afternoon, a patrol car stopped in front of my house. 2 officers came in, and I showed them the footage. They exchanged a quick look, then nodded. "We'll take it from here," one said. By evening, the rumor mill was already spinning. Tara came storming to my front porch not long after, her face pale and tight. "Megan," she snapped, her voice trembling with anger. "What did you tell the police?" I opened the door slowly, my expression calm but cold. "The truth." Her eyes widened. "You can't be serious. Josh was sleepwalking. He didn't even know what he was doing." I almost laughed. Sleepwalking with a crowbar? Right. She opened her mouth to argue again but stopped when she saw Henry's truck pull into my driveway. He stepped out and walked up beside me, his presence calm but commanding. "Is there a problem here?" he asked evenly. Tara straightened, crossing her arms. "No problem," she said sharply. "Just a misunderstanding." "Good," Henry said, his voice low. "Because misunderstandings don't involve breaking into someone's garage." Tara's glare could have burned holes through both of us. "You think you're so high and mighty, don't you, just because people suddenly care about that stupid bike?" I held her gaze. "No, Tara. I just care about honesty and boundaries." She scoffed, muttered something under her breath, and stormed back home, slamming her door so hard the windows rattled. Henry turned to me with a sigh. "You all right?" "I think so," I said quietly. "But she's not going to let this go." He nodded. "Then we make sure you're ready for whatever comes next." You did the right thing, Megan. The following day, things shifted in a way I hadn't expected. Word spread quickly that Josh was under police investigation, and suddenly, the same neighbors who used to gossip about me were now avoiding them. I'd gone from being the subject of mockery to the quiet center of sympathy. At the bakery, customers started asking cautiously, "Is it true about your neighbor?" I tried not to engage in the gossip, just nodding politely, but I could feel it, something in the balance of this little town had changed. Later that week, Tara showed up at the bakery again, this time without makeup, her face blotchy and tired. "I just wanted to apologize," she muttered, refusing to meet my eyes. "Josh made a stupid mistake. We're dealing with it privately." I didn't gloat. I simply said, "I hope you understand now why that bike means so much to me." She hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, I do." But there was no warmth in her tone, only bitterness. After she left, Henry came by the shop to check in. "How's the bike holding up?" he asked with a smile. "It's fine," I said. "Stronger than ever." "Good," he said. "Because the restoration team called. They're ready to start the final cleaning and preservation before the auction." Hearing that made my heart flutter. "You really think it's worth all this trouble?" He chuckled softly. "I think it's worth even more than you realize." For the next few days, I focused all my energy on preparing the bike for the appraisal. Henry helped me carefully transport it to a trusted restoration shop, where experts cleaned the chrome, polished the frame, and ensured the serial engraving was preserved. I watched the process with quiet awe. The teal shimmered under bright light, the metal gleamed, and for the first time, I saw what collectors must have seen all along: timeless craftsmanship and beauty. When the restoration team finished, they wheeled it out for me to see. My throat tightened. It was stunning. The same bike my father once rode through muddy streets now looked like it belonged in a museum. Henry grinned. "You ready for Saturday?" I nodded, though part of me still felt nervous. Ready as I'll ever be. As we loaded the bike into his truck, I caught sight of Tara standing by her window, watching us. For a second, our eyes met. Her expression wasn't anger anymore, it was envy, sharp and unmistakable. I turned away, deciding not to give her the satisfaction of seeing me react. That evening, as I sat alone in my living room, the faint scent of polish still lingering on my hands, I thought of my father again. I could almost hear him saying, "Don't let the noise around you drown out what's important." The world had turned loud lately, rumors, jealousy, greed, but under it all, I knew exactly what mattered. The memory of a man who taught me the meaning of worth, not through money, but through love and endurance. And now, his legacy gleamed brighter than ever. And when the restoration finished, even I couldn't believe how stunning it looked. Walking into the auction house, I felt my father's spirit beside me. It was Saturday morning, crisp and clear, the kind of day where sunlight feels like a blessing. Henry picked me up early, and we drove in silence for a while, the restored Handley cruiser carefully strapped in the back of his truck. Every bump in the road made my stomach tighten. I wasn't sure if it was nerves or guilt or both. When we pulled up to the auction house, I couldn't believe the crowd. Cars lined the parking lot, and clusters of people were already gathered outside, chatting excitedly. Henry had told me this would be a small private event, but it seemed half the state had shown up. The moment I stepped out of the truck, people's eyes turned toward me. "Is that her?" someone whispered. "The woman with the teal Handley?" I swallowed hard and tried to steady my breathing. Henry smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry," he said softly. "They're here for the story, not just the bike." Inside, the auction hall buzzed with anticipation. The walls were lined with glass cases holding vintage cycling memorabilia, old helmets, faded posters, gleaming metal pedals from the 1940s. And in the center, under a spotlight, stood my bike. My father's bike. It was perfect. The teal paint shimmered like ocean glass, the chromes sparkled, and even the small scratches seemed to tell their own proud story. I walked up to it slowly, brushing my fingers along the handlebar. For a second, everything else, the crowd, the noise, the attention disappeared. Henry placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You ready?" I nodded. "Let's do this." Before the bidding began, Henry introduced me to the main interested buyer, a tall, quiet man with silver hair and a kind expression. "Megan," Henry said, "this is Mr. Langford. He's the curator I told you about." Mr. Langford shook my hand warmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Harper. I've been searching for one of these for years. My brother and I used to build frames modeled after this exact design." "Your brother?" I asked, curious. He smiled faintly. "Yes. He passed away some years ago. He was one of the engineers who worked on the Handley custom project back in the 50s. This model. It's very personal to me." His words hit me like a quiet wave. I wasn't just selling a bike, I was passing on a piece of someone else's history too. When the auctioneer called for everyone's attention, the chatter died instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming, "today's feature presentation is a fully authenticated 1956 Handley Custom Cruiser, serial number H and H0037, one of the rarest surviving models in existence." Cameras flashed. I heard murmurs ripple through the crowd. "Opening bid starts at $15,000. Almost immediately, 3 paddles shot into the air, then 4, then 5. The numbers climbed faster than I could follow. 20,000, 22, 25. My heart pounded. Each increase felt surreal, like watching a movie about someone else's life. 30,000, 35, 38. Henry leaned over and whispered, "You doing okay?" I nodded, though my hands trembled. 42,000, 45, 48. The room buzzed with excitement. Finally, only 2 bidders remained, Mr. Langford and a collector from Seattle. Their back and forth was calm but relentless. 50,000! 51! Mr. Langford hesitated for a moment, then raised his paddle once more. 52,000. The auctioneer smiled. "We have 52,000. Going once, going twice." Bang! The gavel came down, and the crowd erupted in applause. I just stood there, frozen, tears blurring my vision. Henry clapped me on the back, grinning. "You did it, Megan." But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like letting go of something sacred. After the excitement died down, Mr. Langford approached me. He looked emotional, his eyes soft and glistening. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You have no idea how much this means to me." I smiled through my tears. "No, thank you. My dad would have loved to know his bike was going somewhere it would be appreciated." Mr. Langford nodded slowly. "Your father must have been a remarkable man. You can tell a lot about someone by what they leave behind." For a moment, we just stood there, 2 strangers connected by a shared reverence for something that had outlived the people who loved it most. Henry handled the paperwork while I sat in the corner, trying to steady my thoughts. The weight of what had just happened pressed against my chest. I'd gone from being mocked for riding that old teal bike to watching it become the centerpiece of an auction worth more than I'd ever imagined. As Mr. Langford's assistant carefully wheeled the bike toward the transport van, I felt a pang of loss that words couldn't describe. It wasn't about money or fame anymore. It was about the memories welded into every inch of that metal frame, the long summer rides, my dad's laughter, the quiet evenings when he'd tune the gears while humming an old tune. It was leaving me now. But somehow, it felt right. Henry walked over, holding a white envelope. "Here it is," he said softly. "The final check, minus auction fees. $52,000. I took it with shaking hands, staring at my name printed neatly on the front. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, managing a small smile. "I think so. It's just a lot." Henry placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You honored your dad today, Megan. That's worth more than any number on a check." But what happened next would make the entire town's jaw drop. After the auction ended, Mr. Langford approached me privately. The crowd had thinned, the buzz of excitement fading into low murmurs as collectors packed up their purchases. I was still sitting on one of the benches, trying to process everything that had just happened. My father's bike, his pride, his legacy was gone. But it wasn't just sadness I felt. There was something else beneath it. Peace, maybe even closure. Mr. Langford walked toward me, holding a small envelope and a folded photograph. His face looked softer now, less composed and more human. "Megan," he began gently, "there's something I didn't mention earlier. I didn't want to influence your decision before the sale." I frowned slightly. "What is it?" He handed me the photograph first. It was old, black and white, the edges curled from age. In the image, 5 men stood beside a workbench surrounded by bicycle parts and tools. They all looked proud, greasy, and tired in the way that people do when they love their work. My heart stopped when I saw the man second from the left, my father. His hair was shorter, his smile younger, but I would have known him anywhere. He had his arm draped around another man, a man who looked exactly like an older version of Mr. Langford. "I don't understand," I whispered, my throat tightening. Mr. Langford smiled faintly. "That photo was taken in 1956. My brother, Harold Langford, was one of the designers at Handley and Havers. Your father, Richard Harper, worked with him on the same team. They were partners in the final prototype series." I could barely breathe. "My dad helped build the Handley Cruiser?" He nodded. "He didn't just build it, Megan. He crafted it. The 0037 model? That number isn't random. It was their personal project, the one they worked on after hours. They poured everything they had into it, hoping to create a perfect balance of form and function. It was their masterpiece." Tears welled up in my eyes. I looked back down at the photo, tracing my father's smile with trembling fingers. "He never told me." "Maybe he didn't want to," Mr. Langford said gently. "Sometimes people keep their proudest moments private. They let their work speak for them." For a long moment I couldn't speak. All those mornings when my dad used to polish the bike, the way he'd call it special, the way he'd never let anyone else touch it, it all made sense now. It wasn't just a keepsake, it was his creation. Mr. Langford took the envelope from his jacket and handed it to me. "I want you to have this," he said. "It's your share of the legacy." I opened it slowly. Inside was a check, the same $52,000 I'd been handed earlier, but tucked behind it was another slip of paper, embossed with a gold seal. I unfolded it, reading aloud softly, "The Harper Langford Engineering Scholarship Fund." He nodded. "I started it years ago, in memory of my brother. I'd like to rename it to include your father's name as well. It will fund young engineers and designers who dream of creating something timeless just like they did." I blinked back tears. "You don't have to do that. I want to," he insisted kindly. "Without your father, this collection would never have existed. He deserves to be remembered not just as a craftsman, but as a visionary." I covered my mouth, overwhelmed. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." He smiled warmly. "You've already said it by keeping his work alive all these years." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of history pressing gently between us. I thought about all the times people laughed at me for that old bike, all the times I'd been embarrassed to ride it through town. And now, knowing what I knew, I realized I'd been carrying a piece of genius all along. When I finally stood up to leave, Mr. Langford placed a hand on my shoulder. "One more thing," he said. "I plan to display the bike in my collection, but I'd like to include a small plaque. It'll read, 'Built by Richard Harper, preserved by his daughter, Megan Harper.' I hope that's all right with you." I swallowed hard, nodding. "It's perfect." As I walked out of the auction house, the sunlight hit my face, warm and bright. I felt lighter than I had in years. It was as if my father's voice whispered through the breeze, telling me he was proud. Henry met me at the truck, grinning. "Well? How'd it go?" I smiled through tears. "Better than I could have imagined. Turns out my dad helped build the thing." Henry's eyes widened. "You're kidding." I shook my head. "Mr. Langford showed me proof. They worked together. It wasn't just a bike, it was his masterpiece." Henry chuckled softly. "Looks like you inherited his stubbornness for perfection." We both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from relief. For the first time since all this started, I didn't feel like the girl everyone mocked. I felt like my father's daughter. As we drove home, the envelope sat on my lap, the scholarship document glowing faintly in the sunlight. I thought about what that money could do, how it could help others like my dad, dreamers and builders who poured their souls into their work without ever chasing fame. It was more than just a check, it was a legacy. But while I felt peace, others in the town were far from done causing trouble. The news of the $52,000 sale spread faster than wildfire. By the time I got home that evening, everyone in the neighborhood already knew. I hadn't told a soul except Henry, but somehow, within hours, people were whispering on their porches, peeking through curtains, pretending to walk their dogs while staring at my house. I didn't even have to guess where the rumor started. The next morning, Tara was waiting. She stood at the end of her driveway in sunglasses, holding her coffee like it was a prop in some soap opera. "Well, well, Megan," she said sweetly. "Looks like that little antique finally paid off. $52,000, huh? Must be nice to get lucky." I tightened my grip on my car keys. "Luck had nothing to do with it, Tara. My dad built that bike. It was his work." Her smile wavered for just a second before hardening again. "Oh, of course, you always have the perfect story." I didn't bother responding. I just walked past her. But I could feel her eyes burning holes in my back. That same day, I found out the local paper had run a story about me. The headline read, "Local woman sells rare Handley bicycle for $52,000. My name, my photo, and even my street were printed right there for everyone to see. I hadn't agreed to an interview, but someone had clearly leaked the information. The attention was immediate, and not all of it was kind. Some people congratulated me genuinely. Customers at the bakery brought flowers, saying they were proud of me for standing by something everyone else dismissed. But others weren't so kind. Online, I found comments on the community Facebook page. "Must be nice to cash in on a sob story. Bet that bike wasn't even real. Probably scammed some rich collector." The username on one of the nastier posts? Tara W27. At first, I tried to ignore it, but it only got worse. One morning, I walked outside to find a note taped to my front door. It read, "You don't deserve that money. Some of us work for a living." The letters were scrawled in black marker, no signature. I called Henry, my voice shaking. "They're turning on me, Henry. I thought this would all be over after the auction, but it's just getting worse." He sighed. "I'm sorry, Megan. Fame, even small-town fame, brings out people's ugliest sides. But remember, truth always wins out." I tried to believe that, but it wasn't easy. A few days later, I decided to use some of the money for something meaningful. I donated a portion to the local park renovation fund, the same park where my dad had taught me to ride that teal bike. When the committee asked what name to put on the new bike path, I said softly, "The Richard Harper Trail." It felt right. It felt like a full circle. The town council posted the announcement online, complete with a photo of me smiling beside a "Coming Soon" sign. I expected maybe a few kind comments. Instead, Tara's words appeared again beneath the post. Oh, how convenient. Megan Harper buys herself a legacy with her collector money. Must be nice to turn pity into profit. That one hit deep. Henry told me to leave it alone, but I couldn't help it. I typed a reply. For some of us, legacy isn't about money, it's about love and memory. You wouldn't understand. It got hundreds of likes in an hour. For the first time, the tide began to turn. People who'd stayed silent started standing up for me. One neighbor wrote, Tara, weren't you the one who tried to buy that bike for $200 last year? Another added, maybe Megan's story reminds you of what integrity looks like. Within days, the comment section had become a battleground. Tara stopped posting after that, but I still saw her sometimes through her window, glaring at me as I passed by. Then, one night, I was closing up the bakery when a reporter showed up again. Megan Harper? He asked, stepping through the door. Do you have any comment on the recent accusations that your bike might not have been authentic? My stomach dropped. Accusations? From who? He looked uncomfortable. A local source. Someone claiming the serial number was forged. I didn't need to ask who. I already knew. I called Henry immediately after the reporter left. She's spreading lies now, I said. She's saying my dad's work was fake. Henry's voice was calm, but I could hear the anger beneath it. Let her talk. People like that always reveal themselves eventually. You don't owe anyone proof beyond what you've already shown. Still, the words haunted me. The idea that anyone could question my father's integrity filled me with a cold fury I'd never felt before. A week later, everything shifted again. The town paper published a follow-up piece, not about me this time, but about Josh. He'd officially been charged with attempted theft. The police had released a statement confirming he'd confessed after being shown the footage. When I read that line, I smiled for the first time in days. Karma had arrived right on schedule. By the next weekend, the story had flipped. People weren't whispering about me anymore. They were whispering about them. Invitations to neighborhood events stopped showing up in Tara's mailbox. Her friends avoided her at the grocery store. I didn't celebrate it out loud, but inside, I felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. I hadn't done anything to ruin her reputation, she'd done it herself. And then, something poetic happened. Karma came knocking at her door. Tara's husband lost his job after the theft charges resurfaced. It happened quietly, but word spread fast as it always does in a small town. The insurance company he worked for couldn't overlook his arrest, even if the charges were minor. Within a week, their pristine white Range Rover was gone, replaced by an old sedan that looked out of place in their polished driveway. Tara tried to pretend nothing had changed, waving at neighbors like she always did, but everyone could see through the act. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel some satisfaction. After months of mockery, intrusion, and jealousy, the universe had finally balanced the scales. But it wasn't joy, I felt it was peace. The storm that had followed me for weeks was finally moving somewhere else. Tara stopped showing up at the bakery. No more fake smiles, no more barbed compliments. The silence was strange at first, but I welcomed it. I could finally focus on what mattered. The money from the auction sat safely in the bank, but I didn't want it to collect dust. I wanted it to mean something. That's when a man named Aaron came into the bakery one afternoon. He introduced himself as part of the city's cultural committee. We're planning a new exhibit for the community center, he explained. Something that celebrates local craftsmanship and innovation. I heard about your story through Mr. Langford's museum. Would you be interested in helping design a display? I blinked, surprised. You mean about the bike? He nodded. About everything. The legacy, the history, the personal side of it. We want to inspire people to see value in the things they overlook. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My father's work, his story living on in a public exhibit, it felt right. I'd love to, I said finally. Over the next month, I worked closely with Aaron and his team. We created a timeline of the Handley Cruiser's history, framed old photos Mr. Langford provided, and even included a few personal items from my father's workshop, his old wrench set, a faded notebook of design sketches, and the original receipt I'd found in the attic. The grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday morning. The local paper called it a tribute to timeless craftsmanship, the Harper legacy. Seeing my father's name in print that way made my chest ache with pride. When the day came, the community center was packed. Families, cyclists, students, and even the mayor showed up. The centerpiece of the exhibit was a replica of my father's teal Handley cruiser, recreated in stunning detail by a local restoration artist. Beneath it was a small bronze plaque that read, "Dedicated to Richard Harper, whose craftsmanship proved that true worth is built to last." I stood beside it, greeting visitors as they asked questions and admired the displays. Henry was there too, smiling from ear to ear, and even Mr. Langford made the trip to attend. But there was one face I didn't expect to see in the crowd, Tara's. She stood near the entrance, arms folded, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment, our eyes met. There was no malice in hers this time, just quiet defeat. She didn't approach me, and I didn't approach her. She simply turned and walked out before the speeches began. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. When the ribbon was cut, applause filled the room. People took photos, children pointed at the bikes, and the mayor shook my hand, thanking me for sharing my family's story. Reporters snapped pictures, asking about my plans now that the exhibit was a success. "I think I'm just getting started," I told them honestly. That evening, as I locked up the bakery, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It read, "You did good today. Your dad would be proud." No name, but I knew who it was from. Tara. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. A few weeks later, I got another visit from Aaron. "We've been talking," he said. "The cycling exhibit has been such a hit that we're expanding it into a permanent feature at the community museum. We'd like you to serve as a consultant for the restoration projects. We'll even pay you, of course." I laughed softly, stunned. "I fix pastries, not priceless antiques." He grinned. "Maybe it's time to add another skill to your resume." And so, I did. I began spending a few hours each week helping restore old bikes and artifacts for the museum. It was soothing work, delicate, patient, and deeply meaningful. Every time I tightened a bolt or polished a faded frame, I thought of my dad, and how he'd smile at the idea of his daughter carrying on his passion. Word spread about the exhibit's success, and soon, people started visiting the bakery not just for pastries, but to ask about restorations. At first, I laughed it off, but then I realized maybe I could. With Henry's encouragement, I decided to open a small workshop behind the bakery. Nothing fancy, just a converted storage shed with a workbench, some tools, and a sign that read, "Harper Restorations, where every story rides again." Business started slow but steady. A few customers brought in rusted bikes they hadn't ridden in years, wanting to bring them back to life. Every time I handed one back, gleaming and new, the look on their faces reminded me why I'd never wanted a fancy car. I preferred things with history, with character, with soul. The workshop became my sanctuary. And Tara? She moved out of the neighborhood a few months later. No announcement, no goodbye. Just a for sale sign one morning, and then silence. I watched the moving truck pull away from my window and whispered, "Good luck, Tara," because I meant it. Life had finally come full circle. The grand opening drew huge crowds and local media coverage. Reporters called me the woman who turned ridicule into legacy. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note and a key. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning, tucked neatly between bills and advertisements. The handwriting was elegant and familiar, Mr. Langford. My heart skipped a beat as I sat at the kitchen table, carefully breaking the seal. A small brass key fell into my palm, cool and heavy, followed by a folded note written in graceful cursive. "Dear Megan, there's something I'd like to show you. It's something that belongs to both of us, I believe. The enclosed key will let you into my private collection room at the museum. Please come by this Friday afternoon if you're free. Sincerely, Arthur Langford." I read it twice, my mind spinning. He'd already done so much buying the bike, honoring my father's name, establishing the scholarship. What else could there be? Friday couldn't come fast enough. When it finally arrived, I left the bakery early, dressed neatly but modestly, nervous in a way I hadn't been since the auction. The museum was quiet when I arrived, the air faintly scented with oil and varnish. Mr. Langford met me in the lobby, smiling like he'd been waiting all day. "I'm so glad you came," he said warmly. "Follow me." We walked through the main exhibit halls, where rows of bicycles gleamed under soft golden lights. Each one seemed to carry a story, the evolution of design, of human ambition, of motion turned into art. Finally, we reached a heavy oak door marked Private Collection. Mr. Langford handed me the key. "You should be the one to open it," he said. My fingers trembled as I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door clicked open, and a wave of faint oil and leather scent drifted out. The room was beautiful, quiet, reverent. Spotlights illuminated a dozen display pedestals, each featuring a rare, restored bicycle. But my gaze stopped on the one in the center. My father's teal Handley cruiser. It stood there, perfectly preserved, gleaming under the light like it had been waiting for me. The same scuffs, the same initials near the handlebar, only now it looked almost alive. The brass plaque beneath it read, "Model number 0037, built by Richard Harper, preserved by his daughter, Megan Harper." I gasped softly, my eyes welling with tears. "You kept it just the way it was," I whispered. Mr. Langford nodded. "Of course, it didn't need perfection, it already had soul." I stepped closer, my reflection shimmering faintly in the polished chrome. It looked surreal seeing it there, behind glass. Yet I felt a strange sense of calm. "It doesn't feel like it's gone," I said quietly. "It feels home." He smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd feel." Then he handed me another envelope. "I wanted to show you something else," he said. "Your story, your father's story, has inspired something bigger than either of us." Inside the envelope was a printed letter from Modern Heritage magazine. My eyes widened as I read the header. "Feature story approval. The woman who wrote history. They want to run an article about you," Mr. Langford explained. "About your father's craftsmanship, your journey, and the legacy that's come from it all. I told them I'd only agree if you co-wrote it with me." My voice caught. "Me? Write it? Who better?" He said simply. "You've lived every word of it." I felt an overwhelming mix of pride and disbelief. My dad's story, our story, was going to be told to the world. I imagined people reading it, learning about the quiet man who built something timeless in his small garage, never realizing how much it would one day mean. We spent the afternoon in that quiet room, talking about the past. Mr. Langford shared stories about working with his brother, how they'd admired my father's dedication, how even then, they'd known he was different, patient, passionate, humble. "He wasn't building for profit," he said. "He was building for purpose. That's rare." I smiled through tears. That's exactly who he was. Before I left, I asked, "Do you ever regret selling it to me first, before realizing the connection?" He chuckled. "Some things are meant to find their way home, Megan. I was just the middleman." As I walked toward the exit, I turned for one last look at the teal bike under the soft museum light. For years, people had mocked it, laughed at me for riding it, called it junk. And now, it stood as a symbol of artistry, love, and perseverance. I could almost hear my dad's voice again, his laughter, his encouragement, his simple advice: "Keep pedaling, kiddo." When I stepped outside, the sun was low on the horizon, washing the world in amber light. I opened the magazine letter again and traced the headline with my fingertip. "The Woman Who Wrote History." I smiled. That title wasn't just about me, it was about him. A week later, I got an email from the editor, asking for a photograph to accompany the story. I knew exactly which one to use. The picture I'd found months ago of my father standing proudly beside the Handley cruiser, grease on his hands, a grin on his face. That photo now hangs in my workshop, right above my workbench. Every time I look at it, I'm reminded that dreams don't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes, they just need someone to keep them in motion. As we talked, I noticed the check still framed in his office, a reminder of how much value love can carry. And yet, I knew there was one last thing I needed to do. A year later, I opened a small bike restoration shop in my father's name, Harper and Daughters. It still feels surreal saying those words out loud. The "and daughters" part wasn't just wishful thinking, it was a promise to the future. Someday, if I ever had a family of my own, I wanted them to inherit more than just a business. I wanted them to inherit a story, a belief that something old, something forgotten, can always be made new again. The shop sits right beside the bakery now, in the space that used to be an old storage unit. Henry helped me renovate it: polished wood counters, soft amber lights, and walls lined with tools, each one neatly hung the way my dad used to organize his garage. The faint smell of oil and metal always greets me when I unlock the door each morning. It's not glamorous, but it feels like home. Business came slowly at first, mostly curious locals dropping by to see the woman who sold the golden bike. But soon, people began bringing in their own bicycles: bent frames, rusted chains, faded paint. Some were worth nothing, others were worth everything to the people who owned them, and I treated every single one like it was priceless. One afternoon, a father and daughter came in with a pink bike that had belonged to the girl's grandmother. "It's just old," the man said sheepishly. "Probably not worth fixing." I smiled, touching the cracked handlebars gently. "If it still means something, it's worth fixing." A week later, when they came back to pick it up, the little girl's eyes went wide. "It looks brand new," she squealed, spinning the pedals with her small hands. Her father's smile mirrored the one I remembered on my own dad's face. That moment alone was worth more than any check. Word spread. And soon the shop became more than just a place for repairs, it became a place for stories. People brought in bikes that carried their childhoods, their adventures, their grief, and their hope. Every repair came with a story, and I listened to them all. Henry still drops by a few times a week, though he jokes that he's retired from antique hunting. He sits at the counter, drinking coffee and watching me work. "You know," he said one morning, "your father would be proud. You didn't just keep his legacy alive, you multiplied it." I smiled, tightening a bolt on a refurbished frame. "I think he's been guiding me this whole time." He chuckled. "That wouldn't surprise me one bit. As for Mr. Langford, he keeps in touch regularly. The museum's exhibit on the Handley Cruiser continues to draw visitors from across the country. He even sent me a framed copy of the magazine article, "The Woman Who Wrote History," with a note that read, "Your father's story continues to inspire." It hangs right above the front counter at my shop. Sometimes I still visit the museum. The teal bike stands proudly under its spotlight, surrounded by photographs of the original design team. Every time I see my father's face in that group photo, smiling beside the men who shared his dream, I whisper a quiet thank you. The neighborhood has changed too. Tara and Josh sold their house months ago, and new neighbors moved in: a young couple with 2 little boys who love to ride their bikes around the cul-de-sac. They wave every morning when I open the shop, shouting, "Hi, Miss Megan!" Their laughter fills the street that once echoed with mockery. Peace has finally returned. The scholarship fund that Mr. Langford and I created, the Harper Langford Engineering Scholarship, has already helped 6 students pursue mechanical design. Every year, I get letters from recipients telling me about their inventions and dreams. One wrote, "Your father's work reminds me that even the smallest creation can change lives." Sometimes, I read those letters out loud in the shop when it's quiet. I like to imagine my dad listening. On the anniversary of the auction, the museum held a small ceremony to honor the scholarship's first graduates. Henry and I both attended. As I stood before the crowd, holding the microphone, I said, "A year ago, I was the woman everyone laughed at for riding an old rusty bicycle. Today, I'm standing here because that same bicycle carried my father's legacy, farther than I ever could have imagined. What people mock today might be what inspires them tomorrow." The room erupted in applause. That night, after the ceremony, I rode my own teal bicycle home, the one I'd restored myself. It wasn't my father's original Handley, of course, but it was built in his image, using parts he once tinkered with, and a frame design I'd learned from his notes. As I pedaled down the quiet streets, the breeze brushing my face, I felt him beside me again, steady and proud. The moonlight caught the chrome of my handlebars, and for a moment, it was like nothing had changed at all, just me, my bike, and the open road ahead. When I reached home, I parked the bike outside the shop, looking up at the glowing sign, Harper and Daughters, Restorations with Heart. I whispered softly, "We made it, Dad." Inside, the shop was warm and still. The tools hung neatly, the benches clean, and the faint scent of oil and polish lingered in the air. On the wall, a framed photograph of my father stood above the workbench. The same one from his workshop decades ago. I smiled up at it and flicked off the lights. Because sometimes, the quietest success isn't measured in money or fame, it's measured in peace, in pride, and in the steady hum of something built to last. Because to me, it was never about the check, it was about proving that the things people mock can one day become priceless.